Welcome back to College Football Addiction. John Kurtz, you can find his show here on YouTube. We'll link it in the description, the John Kurtz Show. John, how you doing, man? It's been a minute.
I know. I'm doing great, TJ. How are you, man?
I'm good. Counting down the days. I think we're at 34, 33 days. And man, it's a K-State, Iowa State in Dublin, which I've sang the praises of how cool it was to go over there and do this. But we're getting close.
I was going to say, that's the nice part about it this year is that the Big 12 gets to take center stage and really each of the next 2 years because you'll have TCU doing it next year too. So I think it'll be nice. I mean, look, the Big 12 I think is wise to put teams in that platform as much as they can because as much as you can get the entire college football world looking at you, like thirsting for some football, like people will watch and people will tune in. So it'll be a nice spotlight for two of the better teams in the league this year. Yeah.
Speaking on next year, the caveat that I really need, and I don't really care how the Belichick thing works out long term. If it's a dumpster fire, that's great. If it works out for a few years, that's great too. Like, when you're making content, it just needs to not be like, 7-5 or something.
Right.
But I do need him there for that game next year because the appeal for that game feels like it would be times 100 if it's a first year head coach. TCU, we'll see what they could have a good year this year. They finished strong last year. So but if he's there, I do think that helps that game a ton and is one that I am kind of tentatively trying to figure out if I can make it across the pond for or not. So we'll see.
Totally agree. It's funny this year. I know there was some disappointment in Big 12 circles that game day is not actually going to get out there live like they were last year at Dublin. Unfortunately for this game, but next year, Belichick out there, I feel like you might get the game day crew. What I want to know is what were the negotiations on this like, and could Brett Yormark have figured out how to slide in Colorado for that? Make it Dion v. Belichick out in Ireland at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. That would be, you talk about a circus. That would be it. All right, kind of big picture here. I watched some of your show that aired on Sunday night, and you talked a little bit about Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti. Maybe the rift right now. I think the most frustrating part for me as just a college football fan, not a Big Ten supporter, not an SEC supporter, not a homer for one of those conferences, but an understanding of where we are in college football. I think the biggest frustration that I have, and we can dive into some of the back and forth, which hasn't there's not been shots fired or anything like that. But some of the back and forth is it seemed like we were getting really close to a Big Ten SEC scheduling agreement, which look, you can have your thoughts on the SEC and the Big Ten and the marketing behind ESPN and all these things. I do think that had been good for college football. I think for college football in general, getting some better out of conference scheduled games. I mean, you just mentioned the UNC TCU. We've got Georgia Tech, Colorado this year. Baylor plays Auburn, Florida State, Alabama, LSU, Clemson. These, I'm the biggest one, Texas and Ohio State. I think these out of conference matchups are probably what most people would be excited about. Obviously, rivalries are always going to be big and always kind of dominate, but it seems like we put kind of a slowdown on that. And we've obviously put a slowdown on the playoff kind of changes, expansion, which we'll go into later. But just big picture thoughts on this Sankey, Petitti, I don't know, it's not a feud, it's not a battle, but just the atmosphere right now we have with the big two conferences.
Yeah, I feel like the most appropriate word, as I was hearing you describe it and lay it out, is perhaps tension. There's a tension between the Big Ten and the SEC right now. I know Greg Sankey, his direct quote from the Feinbaum show the other day was that there's no rift between the commissioners. Now, he said, if I'm going to use his words specifically, there's no rift between the commissioners, and he really wanted to throw some cold water on that. Said, look, I talked to Tony Petitti earlier today. This was back last Thursday. And he said, I've spoken to him 4 times within the last week. I would beg to differ a little bit with his phrasing, though. I mean, there quite literally is a rift between the two conferences right now. It's just whether or not you want to believe that it's something that's going to be long-term or what's the intensity of it. I think that's where the real question comes in. But you can't deny that these two conferences were linked arm in arm. I mean, they were ready to go. They've been meeting together without everybody else. Obviously, for a while, they had been dictating everything about the college football playoff. But even when it came to just governance, big picture college sports over the next 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it might be, and however you project that out, they'd been meeting about that. And so it really felt like, hey, there's not much anybody else can do. When you have two entities that powerful that are moving together, in lockstep in one direction, what are you going to do, man? There's no way that you can get out in front of that. You're just going to get run over. But now we've started to see things shift a little bit. And obviously it did start really with the introduction of that 5+11 playoff plan from the Big 12 and the ACC, which could have been a little bit of a poison pill there. But that disagreement, I mean, it seems pretty clear. Like, just look how Big Ten fans have been acting on social media, like on Twitter lately. The Big Ten fans have been pretty upset by this. It's very easy, I think, for anybody to turn on the SEC, right? When you feel like the SEC has slighted you or wronged you in any way, it's very easy to turn around and be like, well, hey, wait. We're not going to let the SEC walk over us, especially if you're the Big Ten right now. Like, hey, we just won the last 2 national championships. Why do we need to let the SEC walk over us and ruin what we thought was a great plan to set up with the 4-4-2-2, the non-conference scheduling agreement you're talking about, everybody playing an equal amount of conference games, and then being able to have those playing games at the end of the year? This will be great. Look, we're all moving forward with that. Now, there's been a wrench thrown in that plan, and it's looking like, I mean, we'll see, but it's looking like there's a decent chance that we could go into 2026 with just a 12-team playoff again. And remember, it's the Big Ten that was really pushing for the 16-team expansion in the first place. Like, the Big Ten wants the expanded playoff more than anybody because they have such a big, bloated league right now. So the more bids that are available, the better for that conference. So they've been more of the driving force. Now they obviously feel a little bit like, hey, there's a bump in the road that's not our fault. We thought we had everybody on board with this. So I doubt that you're going to hear Tony Petitti say much in the way of, like, certainly not taking shots. Even, Brett Yormark, I think, kind of took a veiled shot at Tony Petitti. I don't think you'll see anything that aggressive, but I do wonder if you'll sense a bit of the frustration at where things are at. That's why it's so intriguing to me this week what happens, because we hear Greg Sankey talk all the time. Love him or hate him, you do have to give him credit for that. He's not afraid of a microphone. He'll go out there and talk. We just don't hear Tony Petitti say a whole lot. So I'm really interested to see what the tone is going to be coming out of Vegas for Big Ten Media Days.
It's interesting to me that the rift exists with respect to the playoff, and in a minute we'll get into 5-11, 4-4-2-2-1. Like what's better? What are two, in my opinion, bad options. But I wonder why the rift exists, and I'm asking you to speculate on something that maybe only Greg Sankey really knows. But to me, I don't know that things change too much for the 5-11, 4-4-2-2-2 for the big conferences. You're still. I understand the idea of the number of conference games. I understand the idea of the SEC wants strength of schedule weighted differently than it is. I mean, I guess I get all that, but I wonder what changed from them being so in lockstep to having this rift now, having this change of opinion. Because it did seem like we were getting close to a decision that, the two would make together and the rest of college football would shut up and get in line.
It's actually it's an interesting point, because if you're looking at the overall totality of where the state of the sport is right now, like the SEC and Big Ten are so far out in front of everybody else that, like, what does it really matter? I can understand how a college football fan would look at it and be like, especially if you're a Big 12 or an ACC fan or a G5 fan, you're like, what does it really matter? You guys have all the power now. It's not going to change that much, whether it's 5-11 or 4-4-2-2. It's going to be about the same. You're still going to get tons of bids. You're still going to make tons of money. You'll be way out in front of everybody. But I think the Big Ten would look at it and say, well, there's a chance we're leaving more money on the table because of the play-in games that we could have. How you change championship weekend like that, non-conference scheduling. If we get better non-con schedules, that will add more money to unlock from our TV deals. And we need money now because of rev sharing. And the Big Ten, again, this is where I think some of that comes in, where the Big Ten has to be a little more miffed right now. The Big Ten has bigger athletic departments that typically have more Olympic sports to fund, and that's becoming more in jeopardy now. Like, you're seeing sports beginning to get cut because of rev share and how the finances have changed in college sports, which is why, to go off on another tentacle of this, you've got a guy like Cody Campbell, Texas Tech multi-billionaire booster, who is really pushing for, we need to save Olympic sports and save women's sports because they're in jeopardy of getting cut now that everybody's in such a crazy arms race for football. So I think that's a lot of the idea, hey, we can milk a bit more money out of this if we do it this way, is what the Big Ten would tell you. I think for the SEC, it sure sounded like it was just the coaches that really flipped on Greg Sankey. And ultimately, Sankey's got to do what's in the best interest of his constituents. his member schools. And the coaches, I think, did not like the idea of a playing game, didn't want to have to go through the wear and tear of like another big time high leverage game. And then we're talking about an expanded playoff where you'll have to be playing more games. And it's just like, okay, that's going to be a lot for us to deal with. So let's not do that when we can just try to rig in a way what's going on with the strength of schedule and how teams are actually making the playoff and grab a couple extra bids that way without having to put ourselves through that. And we can still preserve our 8-game league schedule and be able to play Nicholls State in week 11. You know, I mean, the thing that the SEC does well, which is brilliant, by the way. I mean, I say that somewhat condescendingly, but it's pretty brilliantly done by the SEC. I think it's been great for years for them. So to me, that's fundamentally what a lot of it comes down to. And I think that's where Big 12 and ACC, if you agree with what they're trying to do, they were pretty smart to almost like see what the SEC coaches would be thinking there. Like, hey, if we can plant this seed, that'll really start to spoil all of this.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too. There's such a debate over strength of schedule, and obviously everybody looks right at the Alabama-SMU situation, and yeah, any day of the week, would we have probably all picked Alabama over SMU on a neutral? Yeah, sure. Like, I get that. Alabama, my whole take with that, though, and you may think the same, and I'll get your thoughts, but my whole take with that is Alabama could have also lost to Georgia. And in that big comeback that Georgia had, and I'd probably still take them head-to-head against SMU. They probably could have lost to South Carolina as well. They probably could have been 6-6 or 7-5, and I probably would have still said, yeah, head-to-head, I'd probably still take Alabama on a neutral field. Now, not that SMU could have won that game or anything like that, but there does have to become a point where, yeah, strength of schedule matters, but the results on the field also have to matter. There were 2 SEC teams with 2 losses ahead of a 1-loss Indiana team. There was an SEC team with 3 losses in Alabama ahead of a 2-loss ACC team. They're almost building this argument of, man, strength of schedule absolutely screwed us last year. And in my opinion, it really didn't. You know, both Georgia and Tennessee were ahead of 1-loss Indiana. Alabama, with their 3 losses, was ahead of 2-loss Miami because of strength of schedule. Now, in the third scenario, Alabama got screwed by SMU, I guess, if that's the route you want to go. But they're almost building it on this false premise of, man, if we don't get this strength of schedule fixed, we're out of luck. And it's like, wait a minute, guys, strength of schedule have been, I mean, shoot, go back the year before. I mean, Alabama's strength of schedule is what got them into the playoff. And so 3 of our last 4 scenarios, the SEC directly benefited from strength of schedule. I don't know that needs to be tweaked at all because it hurt them 25% of the time.
And I think you're spot on with this. I would even argue it didn't really hurt them. I mean, how many teams in the country would have gotten the benefit of the doubt at 9-3 to even be right there on the outside looking in of the playoff? Like, I think they got a lot of respect for their strength of schedule last year, and it's why Alabama and South Carolina and Ole Miss damn near still got into the playoff. It's simply because of the strength of schedule number, and there's really nothing else because they had lost 3 games. And so, yeah, that is what's very annoying about it. It was just, for once, really in the last like 20 years, maybe like 15. We're talking about like mid 2000s, maybe when the SEC stranglehold really took over in college football. For once, they didn't get over the top preferential treatment. You know, it was still preferential treatment for a strength of schedule to be considered there, but it was not this wild over the top, we're going to go way out of line to help you guys out and keep fueling the propaganda machine. And so, yeah, they have really latched on to that. I think there are a couple of dynamics at play. Like, one, you just have the fan, coach, media reaction of like a spoiled child, right? I mean, it's the same thing. If you spoil a child and then all of a sudden you're not going to give them their candy one morning, then yeah, they're gonna throw a fit. Like that's how it goes. Even if you could still look around and say, you still have a very blessed life here that is much better than everybody else's, and you have a lot of advantages that nobody else gets. And so, yeah, I mean that to me, I mean, just look at Lane Kiffin and how he was tweeting and how he was reacting and acting. So it's not even just the fans. So you have that attitude, and then again, I say Greg Sankey has to do what everybody in his conference wants, right? He's the guy that has to go make the moves, and he's seeing this like, okay, well, everybody's freaking out about this. They don't like this. We're the SEC. We can't be, we've got as much leverage as anybody here. Let's turn this into as much of an edge as we can moving forward. Like, we will seize on this moment and make sure that it's going to be something that creates even more of an advantage for us going forward. So it's like I hate it as somebody who's not an SEC fan, but I also like see the wisdom in what the SEC, what Greg Sankey in particular is doing here, like not passing up an opportunity to really completely seize on something that he is feeling from not only a large number of his constituents, but even a lot of people who just cover the game from a national level. It's just so ingrained in people like, oh, well, the SEC should get this crazy over the top benefit for their strength of schedule at all times. And if we don't see it to an embarrassing degree, then something has to change. Like why that can't stand. And so I think he's really taken advantage of that.
Yeah.